Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 5:27 a.m. East Coast time, Wednesday, October 2nd. I'm going to break down this Thursday night football slate between the Seahawks and the Rams, Los Angeles Rams. It's a pretty good slate, right? Last week we had a good Thursday night football, Packers and the Eagles. That turned out to be a really good game. Hopefully we get something like that from this. And also to mention, Draftkings has a 400,000 to first prize pool. Look, it was, I think, last week, maybe the week before, where there was a 300,000 prize pool to first for the first time on just a random Thursday night. Then they do it for every other slate since then for Showdown. Now they have $400,000 to first. I'm assuming that's going to lead to a lot more interest, not only for casuals, right, playing the slate, but also just professionals knowing that, sure, I mean, 100,000, 200,000 to first for these Showdown slates is obviously fantastic money, but now there's even more incentive to want to be playing them and wanting to be getting different and entering 150 lineups, right, because there's so much money to take down. I think it makes these tournaments harder, for sure, right? If you have more professionals in it, just more people in general for a bigger prize pool, it's going to make them harder. But I think that also means that it's even more important now more than ever to really zone in and focus in on things. And look, there's a ton of luck that comes to binking a 400,000 person tournament. If you're entering multiple lineups, though, there's some skill to it. And if you're trying to get different and you're watching this video, you have more skill than the average Joe just playing in these lineups. But again, loads of luck. But we're trying to factor out as much of that as we possibly can here. So welcome to the channel if you're new here. My name is Sal Vetri. I do cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, MLB, WNBA, and NBA streets. Appreciate you tuning in. We just crossed 11,000 subscribers. We crossed 10,000 a week ago today. And for the rest of this week, I'll be doing $100 off my daily fantasy course. So if you want that, just comment down below that you want the coupon for it, and I'll shoot it your way. Thank you all so much. We did a giveaway last week. Reach out to the person in the comment section. So appreciate you all so much. Hit the subscribe button if you get any value from this. And also, if you want to play me, I'm going to do a listener league over on Drafters. It's only going to be 12 people for this week, and we're going to see how it does. If it fills really early, I'll start another one up. And maybe we'll go bigger next week. But 12-person listener league over on drafters.com. If you haven't heard of them, I've been promoting them and really partnering with them on this channel since the get-go, a year ago, really, for the most part. So go check that out. You'll get, if you enter promo code SAL50, SAL50, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus match on up to $25. So you enter $20 in, you'll have $30 in your account, right? 50% deposit bonus match up to $25. And what Drafters is it's a live snake draft that you're allowed to swap players out after if they get hurt. And it's pretty much the 12 of us will be in there acting like it's a snake draft, except we're just snake drafting for 1 week. It's a pretty cool format. I would say a very, very cool format. And it's my favorite place to kind of do the live snake draft style. So if you want to get in there, there's 11 spots left. I'm the first one in. There's a link down below. And then if you're not already on there, you can take advantage of that promotion for the 50% match. That's linked up down below. I'll talk more about that on the stream come tonight or whenever you're watching this Thursday night. And I'll be live at 6:30 p.m. East Coast time to talk about this slate. So check that out. That'll be all linked up in the description, as well as some of my exclusive content over on Patreon. So without further ado, let's get into this slate. So as you can see right here, this is a slate where there's definitely interests of mine in terms of I have an 11-person player pool, but if you're used to watching my content, usually there's 15 or so on these Showdown slates, and usually like there's some difficult choices. You have a team in the Rams that they just have no depth. Like, sure, they have depth on their team, but they just don't use that depth, right? Josh Reynolds is their wide receiver 4, and yeah, people know him because he played last year, but he played last year because Cooper Kupp was injured, right? They only run 3 wide receivers. These 3 wide receivers play 90+% of the snaps. So far this year, you have Josh Reynolds running 10 routes per week. He's an afterthought I wrote down here in this offense. You don't really have much else down here. You have Luke Wilson for Seattle, who's just a blocking tight end. He's ran less than 2 routes per week. Nobody really wants that. You have lots of players down here like CJ Prosise, who Rashad Penny is due likely to be back. Week 2, when CJ Prosise, Rashad Penny, and Chris Carson were all healthy, CJ Prosise only plays 13% of the snaps, right? He's seen a bulk increase to his snaps, one, because last week in week 3, Chris Carson fumbled once again and was sort of half benched in that game. And then this past week, he doesn't see all that many snaps as Carson holds onto the ball about 20% of the snaps. So with Rashad Penny coming back, I think CJ Prosise is pretty much an afterthought in this offense. So it's pretty thin on the Rams side in terms of like who the actual playable people are in terms of getting to a player pool. And then it's pretty thin even on Seattle's side, right? In terms of knowing that Chris Carson is going to be probably the main guy, even if Penny does come back. They've been harping on that for the past week and a half, that he's the main guy, trying to keep his confidence level up. And he did nothing but absolutely dominate and break 21 tackles last week to kind of prove that and hold on to the ball for sure. And it showed the extra ball security during the game. Tyler Lockett is the main option, and then outside of that, you're going to have DK Metcalf lining up for almost every single snap on the left side of the field, and then you're going to have Dron Brown on the right side of the field lining up for almost every single snap when they go 3 wide receivers, 11 personnel. So that's kind of the high level of this, right? So let's get down into each specific player that I have interest in. This is all subject to change come 6:30 at night. And if you join on the live stream, you can see where my decisions are. Last time on the Showdown on Monday night, I played 50 lineups, and it went pretty well. Jalen Samuels, I manually bumped down. If I didn't do that, it probably would have went better. So, starting it off with Russell Wilson, it's just a good spot. Look, this Rams defense was something that I probably made a big mistake on in week 4, just assuming that they were a good defense. Now, I think Marcus Peters is still good. Last year, he wasn't. This year, so far, he has been. But outside of that, Coleman in the slot, Aqib Talib on the other side is just terrible for a cornerback. And then they've had injuries, they've had people leave, and it's really just Aaron Donald up front for the most part. And outside of that, there's not much on this defense, and they were really hidden by playing a Drew Brees team that were the Saints. He left early, playing Cam Newton, who was injured. Now we know that week 1, and just playing teams in general that were not the greatest of offenses at all and didn't have their quarterback at full health or even in the game. So now Russell Wilson comes to town, and also you get to see last week finally a quarterback stays in the game with a good offense, and Tampa Bay just shreds them apart, and Jameis Winston does that. So now you get Russell Wilson in here, who instead of playing as a 5-6 point favorite like he did last week, where historically Pete Carroll teams, when they're favorites, will just run the ball nonstop, i.e. Chris Carson going nuclear last week for 20-plus touches and over 100 yards by a wide margin. But now you get them as pretty much a toss-em, a pick-em. They came in as 1-point underdogs. They're now, last time I checked, 1-point favorites, so it's pretty much a toss-up game. It's a neutral game script instead of one that says, ooh, run the ball more with Chris Carson, against the Rams defense that just got shredded apart and played the most plays that they've played so far on defense in any game by 15. It's a bounce back spot for sure for Russell Wilson in this passing game in terms of not being that effective and really relying on the ground the last time. And then you have also that the Rams are going to struggle to generate pressure. You already have Russell Wilson, one of the best players in the league in terms of evading the rush. And Deshaun Watson is one of these players. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is one of these players. Just evading the blitz and being able to make things happen when pressured. Now you're not going to pressure that guy, a guy who's running much more this year. Already 2 rushing touchdowns on the year. Both came in 1 week, averaging about 20 rushing yards per game, which is much more than he did last year. Yeah, I think Russell Wilson is the play at quarterback if you are going to take one. I usually do recommend taking a quarterback. He's obviously the highest priced player for a reason, is because a lot of people are going to have interest in taking him after what Jameis Winston just did. But I do like Russell Wilson here at 10-6. I guess I'll briefly touch on Jared Goff, as he's a maybe, but probably leans towards a no for me. So I'm only going to end up picking one of these quarterbacks. I mean, they're the 2 highest priced players in the slate, and I don't want to have, although rostering 2 quarterbacks I would say is viable, it's not likely to take something down. And the big reason why is they don't score that many points relative to wide receivers and running backs. Wide receivers and running backs, for the most part, if they have a good game, will score just as much, if not more, fantasy points for cheaper. And then when you're rostering both Goff and Russell Wilson, it's just really hard to pay $20,800 for 2 players that don't have that ceiling upside unless it turns into a complete shootout. But even then, their wide receivers are probably having good games to be into the lineup. So it's just a spot where Jared Goff's on the road, right? Jared Goff is on the road going to Seattle. Like, there's not many places, maybe Kansas City. There's not many places, New England, that it's that just hostile, I would say, in a tough environment to play him. And we know Jared Goff's road splits, home and road splits. He's a top 10 quarterback this year when playing at home. Again, small sample, but even in his career for the last 1.5 to 2 years, top 10 quarterback at home. And he's been outside the top 15 on average when he's on the road. And it's by a wide margin. It's like finishing 29th, 24th, 28th, right, in his last few starts. I still think this Seattle secondary is pretty suspect, right? Week 1, they get torched by Zach Taylor's new offense with the Bengals. Then they get to face a Mason Rudolph Steelers team who just threw 17 out of 30 attempts to running backs last week to have a good game. Then they get to face a Teddy Bridgewater team for the Saints, right? They get to face all these teams, and then last week they faced Kyler Murray, who has clear struggles in the passing game, and that air raid is very horizontal and not down the field. So I still have suspect when they play a good team, which is what they're getting right now, albeit another instance where Jared Goff is not good on the road, but the secondary is not as good as it once was, in my opinion. You do have Shaquille Griffin, who's becoming like a shutdown corner out there. The run defense, I believe, is elite. So that is what kind of concerns me with trying to play Todd Gurley, which we'll get to. But yeah, I don't have as much faith in the Seattle secondary as probably most people do. But even then, I don't have much faith in Jared Goff on the road. So I'm going to choose Russell Wilson there as of right now. Cooper Kupp, it's hard not to like the guy. Look, I know you can get cute. You can get away from Cooper Kupp because he's expensive and he can't keep this up. But he's number 2 in the league in targets right now. He's the leader in yards per route run on this team by a wide margin. And he has a matchup advantage coming out of the slot. That's why he's been dominating the first 4 weeks of the year. 3 straight 100-yard games. The man is averaging over 10 targets per game. 15 coming off of a 15-target game, albeit Jared Goff throws 68 times, right? But this is the thing that's going to happen here, right? Ready? This is a very good Seattle run defense. I mean, there is a lot of studs on this run defense. You still have Bobby Wagner. You still have Flowers, who comes down and crashes on the run a lot and is very effective at that. You still have KJ Wright. You still have Jefferson. You still have Ford. These are all very good run-stop players, and they're going to stop, for the most part, in my opinion, Todd Gurley in his tracks in the backfield. This is going to have to probably become a one-dimensional offense, which makes Jared Goff somewhat intriguing, and definitely intriguing on a slate where it's just one game, but it makes his pass catchers even more intriguing than they usually are when you're not going to be able to establish any sort of run. We saw that last week. Tampa Bay has a stout run defense as well, and they stopped all the running efforts early, right? And they made it a one-dimensional team when they got ahead. So Cooper Kupp, I do like at 9,600. Again, he's for the 5th straight week, starting from week 1 till now. I've said he would be the guy that I want to target. There's no secrets that Jared Goff is literally force-feeding him the ball. On average, just second in targets in the entire league, behind only Keenan Allen. So, yeah, Kupp at 9,600 is completely fine. Tyler Lockett at 9,400. These are the guys that I would want to be getting pieces of. Look, he gets a matchup against Robbie Coleman in the slot, who Chris Godwin just torched for over 172 yards and 2 touchdowns last week, wherein Godwin primarily lined up out of the slot. The only difference I would say is that Godwin's a much bigger receiver than Tyler Lockett, and then Godwin had a much bigger size advantage over Robbie Coleman last week. But that being said, Lockett's going to be running out of the slot for about 2/3 of his routes, maybe even more. We saw him run 80% of his routes out of the slot week 3, so maybe even more. And you're going to get a beneficial matchup, like we just said, against the secondary, especially when it comes to the safeties that are pretty porous. So Tyler Lockett at 9,400, and also a bounce back spot, and a spot where he was also, just a rising tide, what rises all boats, whatever the hell the saying is. Last week did the opposite. That passing game was not that effective because they just didn't use it that much. They got out to a 20-3 lead. I don't expect that this week. Chris Carson is interesting for sure. Even if Rashad Penny's coming back, I think Rashad Penny sees 30% of the snaps at most. And I don't even know if that's the case. I think you probably see somewhere like around a 10% snap split for CJ Prosise, 20% for Penny, and then you get 30 or 70% or so for Chris Carson. And even if Carson's come down to 60, 65%, I think most of the time when he's out there, he'll be touching the ball. It's just a matter of how do you like targeting Chris Carson against this Rams run defense? I think it's better. It's better than targeting the other side of this Todd Gurley against Seattle's run defense. So he'll be the main back after holding onto the ball and breaking up week-high 21 tackles last week. He's going to be involved in the receiving game, and he's going to get all the red zone work for the most part. You'll have Rashad Penny for sure out there spelling him, maybe up to 25% of the time. But if Rashad Penny's out there more, I imagine CJ Prosise is out there less. So Chris Carson, as long as he doesn't fumble the ball, which is definitely a risk, like he got through 1 week without doing it. But if he fumbles, there's a really quick chance that Rashad Penny just sees majority of the snaps, CJ Prosise sees more snaps, and you're just sitting with a Chris Carson who touches the ball 6 times with 1 fumble on the day. But if he's not that type of guy, I like his dual threat capabilities in a game that's going to call for more passing. I would prefer Tyler Lockett, but also so does the price, right? The price kind of indicates that with a $1,200 difference. This is where it starts to get interesting. You have Robert Woods, you have Brandon Cooks, the next 2 Rams wide receivers, where I would project a lot of pass attempts once again for Jared Goff above 40 in this game, and they're a lot cheaper than Cooper Kupp. So it makes it interesting to see how you want to design your lineups if you want to leave money on the table or just get up to another good player. Is that extra $1,600 or even $1,800 from Kupp to Cooks worth it? And I think in some cases it definitely is. Robert Woods is still going to see 7 to 8 targets a game, albeit his matchup is going to be the toughest. He's probably going to get Shaq Griffin on the outside, who right now is one of PFF's top cornerbacks, who's becoming quickly since the middle of last year a shutdown corner. So you're going to get a consistent Robert Woods, but it's not the matchup he had last week against the Bucs. Now he's going to have a much more difficult matchup in a secondary where, yes, I am suspect, but if there's one spot I'm not suspect on in the secondary, it's Griffin. I do believe he's becoming an elite cornerback, and I do believe he will be on Robert Woods. On the other side of that, I think Brandon Cooks would be my second. If not, I'll still say Kupp is my favorite Ram as of now, but at the price point of $7,800, you're going to get the best matchup for Cook against Flowers on probably the left side of the field, and Flowers has been giving up over a 66% completion percentage, already allowing 2 touchdowns on the year, and he's averaging, I think, 70 yards per game to his receiver that he's given up. So you're getting a projection. I mean, obviously we're using a small 4-game sample size, but on average, he's allowing you to have 70 yards and a half a touchdown per game, let's just call it. Now, Brandon Cook's home road splits are very similar to Goff's. He's much worse on the road. But when you have a very, very beneficial matchup, sometimes that pulls it out, right? I mean, we literally just saw this 2 weeks ago when the Rams took Sunday Night Football, I believe, when they had, actually it might have been Monday night, when they played the Browns, who had an injured secondary. When you have a beneficial matchup with good cornerbacks and a solid QB, or good wide receivers and a solid QB, you see Kupp go off. You see Woods have an okay game, and then you see Cooks go off, a guy who's not usually going off on the road, still gets over 100 yards. So I would rank it for this slate, probably Kupp, Cooks, and then Woods. But it's really close, honestly, to be Cooks, Kupp, and then Woods, just due to the price point, like $1,800 savings. If you're really struggling to build out a lineup and an extra $800 can get you somewhere and leave $1,000 on the table, then I might prefer Cooks. DK Metcalf at $6,400, just too cheap. Look, he just had a really bad game. He's probably going to get Marcus Peters, which is the concern here. If he's lining up on the left side the whole game, you probably get Marcus Peters on him. You probably get Jaron Brown on the right side, going up against Aqib Talib, which is a fantastic matchup for Brown. And then you have Tyler Lockett in the slot against Robbie Coleman. So this is a tough matchup for DK Metcalf, but he already has 7 red zone targets or end zone targets this year. That's very good. That's one of the tops in the entire league, if not the best 7 red zone targets. So for a wide receiver. So DK Metcalf, at the price point of $6,400, since it's so suppressed, and we know he's kind of a boomer bust play every single week with a difficult matchup, at least he's at home. I do think, and also just the secondary outside of Peters is pretty garbage, and Peters is not fantastic or a lockdown or a shutdown. He's just a little bit better than average. He's good, I guess you can say. So Metcalf is interesting to me. Will Dissly, I had him as a maybe at first, but he's going to be a yes. Look, he's seen 5 red zone targets this year. Obviously, we know the guy has 4 touchdowns already. He's played more snaps last week with Vannon out. He played in the 80% range of snaps instead of playing in the 50 to 55. But don't over-credit that. He still ran 23 routes. So when he was running 50% of the snaps with Nick Vannon there, a primarily blocking tight end that we saw for Pittsburgh, who actually caught a couple balls the other night on Monday Night Football, when he was there, he was running only 50% routes, Will Dissly, and running about, or 50% snaps and running about 22 routes week 2, 23 routes week 3, and they ran 23 routes week 4 when he saw a bump of 30% snaps. So he's just taking on more blocking responsibilities. He's not running more routes, and that's what you would expect from a guy. It's very similar to what you're seeing from Mark Andrews. He's playing on 50% of the snaps for Baltimore, and he's not increasing his routes run when he plays on more of the snaps or even less. He's just out there running routes when he's out there running routes. So Dissly's just taking on more blocking responsibilities. So due to pricing, I get a little away from him, I would say. Look, he's $7,600. Give me Brandon Cooks for $7,800 every single time there. I mean, if I'm entering 50 lineups, sure, I'm going to get some Will Dissly. But if you're entering 1, 2, 3 lineups, I much prefer getting to Brandon Cooks and or Robert Woods and probably Chris Carson over Will Dissly. I get it. Dissly's going to see targets from Russell Wilson. I completely understand the logic there, that he's been a red zone target for him, that I think I saw something from Adam Levitan on Twitter, that they're Bible narrative now. They go to Bible school together, and we know how strong that can be, right, in the DFS world. No, but honestly, Will Dissly, he's probably overpriced for this spot. I get it. Somebody's going to get in the mentions. How is he overpriced? He has 5 red zone targets, 4 touchdowns, because he's touchdown dependent. That's exactly why he's overpriced. You know how variant touchdowns are? Do you really think Will Dissly is going to finish this year with 16 touchdowns? No. He's not going to finish this year with 16 touchdowns. So if the only reason people are really high on him and playing him at that price tag is because he's scoring touchdowns, well, what happens when the touchdowns go away? Sure, he might catch 5 catches for 40 yards. But is that 9 fantasy points at $7,600 worth it? Maybe. I don't know. But I would just rather probably have Brandon Cooks. My maybes, I already talked about Jared Goff. Jaron Brown is actually in a good spot. So this is interesting. So David Moore is on this team. David Moore ran his most routes last week, but David Moore's been dealing with an injury, and that's why he's not fully up to speed. He's been playing limited in almost every single game, the last 2, really, that he's been playing in so far. So I do have interest in David Moore, and I marked him as a no, but he's only $600. He's getting healthier. He ran 15 routes only last week, though. So he ran 12 routes a week before that. I don't even know if he touches 20 routes this week, which is still a decent amount of routes for the price tag of $600. You probably see him catch 1 to 2 balls. It's just, does he get in the end zone with those, or are they deep catches? So David Moore, I think, is somewhat interesting because he'd be on the field mainly in 4 wide receiver sets, and or if somebody got injured in this game, he'd be then on the field a lot more, but he is still playing limited. I've been checking on his status every single day. Hopefully come Thursday we get something like, oh, he's 75% or 100% now, instead of playing sub 50% out there and only running a certain amount of routes to try and get his feet back under him is what they've been saying. So it's somewhat interesting for me, but I still prefer Jaron Brown, who will see Aqib Talib, who's just been downright terrible. His PFF grades are in the 40s and 50s for every single game. Once you drop below 60, 60 for a PFF grade is they did very meh, kind of bad, maybe some good plays. 50 is that was a pretty bad game. 40s is what was that guy doing out there? Just head on a swivel. Guys were running by him nonstop, and that's exactly what happened last week. against the Bucks, and pretty much every single time Aqib Talib has been targeted this year, it has not been that good. So he's the true wide receiver or 3. He's ran 109 routes in 4 weeks. That's very good. He's averaging 27, 28 routes run per week in an offense that, for the most part, doesn't drop back all that much outside of week 3. It was very skewed. Russell Wilson throwing 50 plus times. Gerald Everett is my last interest at 3,200. I just prefer Everett to Higbee. Look, can Higbee catch a red zone touchdown in this game? Sure, he definitely can. If I'm entering 50 to 150 lineups, I would have Higbee shares. If I'm entering 1 to 2 to 3, which I'm trying to cater more to those people because that's the far majority of you watching this, I'm probably going to prefer Gerald Everett over Higbee because they're both very cheap. Everett's just playing on double the snaps right now. He's running 25.5 routes per week, albeit a little bit skewed from when Higbee didn't play, but Higbee's running about half of that. Everett's the much more, I would say, red zone friendly target, whereas Higbee is more of like a sticks mover / run blocker. So that's it for that. Rashad Penny is not something that I'm probably going to get to. Look, he's playing injured on a short week. They said he's good to go. I imagine he sees 30% of the workload. It's just a matter of, do you think Rashad Penny gets into the end zone? Because he's been very ineffective in the preseason and in this season outside of his one long touchdown run. Outside of that run, this guy is just getting stuffed behind the line of scrimmage, one of the highest stuff percentages in the league. Todd Gurley, no interest. I do trust his Seattle run defense. I think it's very good. And really, when you factor that in with him having probably the most difficult matchup in the entire game, maybe, outside of maybe Robert Woods against Griffin, if that's how it matches up. On the outside, Todd Gurley probably has the toughest matchup in the league, but it's not that. You're paying $8,800 for him. Give me $1,000 less Brandon Cooks. Give me $800 less Robert Woods. Give me $600 less Chris Carson in better matchups. Even Tyler Lockett to pay a little bit more. It's a pricing play based on the matchup. I think he's just too overpriced. Both defenses. We could break down defenses more in the live stream, including kickers as well. I'll just list them as no's here because I just don't like breaking down kickers. Do you think they scored 10 points? Then get them in your lineups. So you should probably, if you're entering 50 to or 20 to 150 lineups, you should probably have some shares of kickers. Not a ton, but I don't know, 15%, 20% depending on the night. This is a night that has a higher game total, so I'd say 10, 15%. Defense is the same exact thing. I would rather get to the Seahawks defense. They're going to be the home favorite as of right now, and you have Jared Goff, who's just not as good on the road. So that's where I'm at right now. I have a player pool right now of 11 players. Usually I like to get it there. I like to have it between 10 and 12 and 13 before the games start. If I was to enter again, I'm going to see what the exposures look like. If I was to enter 50 to 150 lineups for this thing, then I'd probably expand my player pool for sure. I would probably add the defenses in, the kickers in. I'd probably end up having a player pool of, for this slate, 16, 17 players. And I think that's completely fine if you're going to play a ton of lineups. If you're only playing 5, then yeah, having a smaller player pool makes more sense to me. And I probably recommend having the same captain. So that's where I'm at right now. I will have my Showdown tiers up on Thursday morning for all you Patreon folks. My projections will be out later today on Wednesday on Patreon. Our ownership show is Friday. And make sure, go down below in the description, click the link. Promo code is SAL50, 50% deposit match. I'm on up to $25. You enter 20, you get 30. Make sure to click that link and join the contest. There's only 11 spots left as of right now of me recording this. By the time you're watching this, there might be 1 spot left. It's the listener league for me for week 5 of the NFL season. Over on Drafters, it's going to be drafting at 10 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday. So it's a set time to draft. So make sure you're available at 10 a.m. on Eastern time on Sunday morning. I'll be there. We'll be drafting live. We can chat in the box thing, the little box, chat box. I keep flipping this phone. It's wild. All right. Thank you for tuning in. My name's Sal. You can follow me on Twitter at SalVetryDFS. Hit the subscribe button. Love doing these Showdown breakdowns. I'll see you all on Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. East Coast time for a live stream for this. So peace out.
Hey, hold up. 1 second. Check out this page. If you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button, all right? And if you're interested in Patreon, if you're not already a Patreon, you can hit that button on Patreon, become a Patreon. It will take you right there. You can also check me out on Twitter at SalVetryDFS. And hey, if you're interested, this next video that's about to pop up, why don't you check it out as well. See ya.